Welcome to the first video of the Performance Physical Therapy Collaborative. My name is Dr. Trevor Rappa. We're going to start with why Performance PT and what Performance PT is to us. I'm going to get started by first making myself smaller and reading this definition that we wrote. Traditional physical therapy education typically emphasizes the restoration of normal function. Normal, however, does not reflect the chaos of sport or the risk inherent in hazardous occupations like military, law enforcement, and rescue. Normal results are not sufficient when your professional reputation is at stake. Normative values in medicine are typically based on minimal standards of physical function, not those required to excel in sport or high-consequence occupations. For medical providers and coaches who need to navigate the entire continuum of care, from acute injury to end-stage rehabilitation, a different paradigm is needed. The performance therapist concept is not new, but comprehensive programs are lacking. The Performance PT Collab explores the principles and systems we use to ensure that athletes and operators of all levels can confidently return to sport or duty following injury. Bruce Lee once said, "Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own." The Performance PT Collab will help you do just that with regard to sport rehabilitation and your professional development. So what is Performance PT? I can tell you it's not adding a TheraBand to every single exercise that we do. And it's not putting K-tape on every problem, hoping that that is what improves somebody's performance or allows them to actually get back on the field and perform. And that doesn't mean that we don't use TheraBands and that K-tape can't be important, but that is not the kind of fix for the things that we're going to talk about in the Performance PT Collab. To us, this is Performance PT. This is a snapshot from one of our athletes doing a Tier 1 agility drill. Performance PT is about understanding why this shape, why getting into a wide lateral foot plant is critical for multi-directional speed athletes, for any athlete playing a field and court sport. It's about understanding why we want to see that flexion at the athlete's right ankle, hip, and knee. Why we want to see the line of force application going from his right foot through his left shoulder. Why we want to see his foot perpendicular to his new direction of travel like it is. Why we want the pelvis and the shoulders or the pelvis and the trunk at the positions that they are. Performance PT is about understanding the qualities that underpin dynamic athletic movements like this picture kind of shows us. So in the collab, we'll talk about why eccentric goblet squats in our post-op ACL athletes are critical for helping them be able to tolerate exercises like a single leg freeze drop landing. We'll talk about how we help this athlete go from about 2.5 months out of surgery, being able to do a single leg squat like this, to at about 4 months out of surgery, being able to handle some single leg plyometrics, to 3.5 months later, being able to handle a single leg lateral plyometric like this. And this was an athlete who had a multi-ligament tear in his knee, tore both meniscus, and tore his biceps femoris off the bone. So this was an extreme case where, multiple structures in the knee were injured. And over the course of about 7, 8 months, he was able to do all 3 of these progressions. We'll go over the low box shuffle and why that's my favorite drill to do with my return to sport athletes, how it helps them get into that wide lateral foot plant, teaches them to push and to cover space, how it can help them be reactive and elastic with their lower extremity. And we'll talk about exercises like this Tier 2 ball throw where I'm launching over the athlete's head. They're having hip turn and escape space. And we'll talk about why the positions that the athletes hit in these type of drills are so important. We'll go over the progressions we use to help athletes run over 20 miles an hour again, and the plyometric progressions that help them do that. And that's a huge thing for us, is we're going to go over a ton of our plyometric progressions with everybody. We'll talk about cases like this NFL athlete where day 1, I asked him to jump as far as he was comfortable, and this is what he did. To the strength progressions that we use with him, and why this exercise like a K-box Zercher squat is so important for improving his eccentric strength and his eccentric rate of force development, and how that helped him handle a Tier 3 agility drill like this, where he gets in that wide lateral foot plant on his left leg, explodes laterally to his right, and is able to cover space and escape space. So what is not performance physical therapy then? It's not relying on a 3x10 rep scheme for everything. There are so many loading parameter variables that we can choose from, and we need to understand how to manipulate based upon the athlete's needs. We're going to cover how we change tempo, how we choose our rep scheme based upon the athlete's needs and the qualities that we're trying to train. Performance PT is not relying on manual muscle testing as the only form of strength testing that we do with our athletes. It's not only using TheraBands and 5-pound dumbbells. And another one I would add to that is leg press. It's understanding all of the different tools that we have access to, from trap bars to K boxes to plyo boxes to low boxes. Like, there's so many things that we can use to help improve an athlete's outputs and their qualities. And we're going to talk about all of that during the collab. Performance PT is not doing volume-based running before plyometrics. And if you look at probably 90% of post-op protocols, they're all about volume-based running before doing plyometrics and before doing speed work. And for us, plyometrics are the foundation of any type of running that you want to do. And we take a sprint-based approach to our return to run and to our return to sprint rather than a volume-based approach. Performance PT is not doing speed ladders as the only change of direction work before an athlete actually steps back on the court or on the field. Performance PT is not being limited to just box jumps as the only plyometric progression that we do with our athletes. And it's not blaming everything on glute med weakness. Another one I would add to that is it's not saying that every muscle is either tight or weak and then therefore needs to be stretched or strengthened. One of the things that we talk about in our Movement Foundations course is proximal orientation dictates distal performance. And we're going to elaborate on that a lot more throughout the collab. So what can performance PTs do? Performance PTs can work along the entire return to sport continuum. So from day one post-op or whatever day post-op the athlete actually sees you for the very first time to the day that they get cleared and the day they step back on the court or on the field. Performance PTs can work with an athlete along that entire continuum. They can apply and understand biomechanical principles. So what that means is we understand and have rationale and reasoning for why the plyometric progressions, sprinting progressions, multi-directional speed progressions, throwing progressions, all have reasoning for why they are the way they are, because they're based in these biomechanical principles and based in the laws of physics and how we manipulate force. Performance PTs understand how to assess and alter an athlete's movement strategy. So we're going to cover force time curves. So looking at an athlete's movement strategy in a counter movement jump and other force plate testing. And we're going to cover tons and tons of videos and look at those movement strategies and compare them to our model of movement to be able to understand if an athlete's movement strategy should be altered or if we should try to alter an athlete's movement strategy. Performance PTs can apply strength and conditioning principles into rehabilitation. So performance PTs understand the specific adaptation to impose demand principle. They understand progressive overload, reversibility, and so much more. Performance PTs can write multiple phases of a strength program. And kind of like I alluded to earlier, a lot of PT strength training, strength programs it's just what can they do with TheraBands and really light dumbbells and sometimes a leg press, and if you're lucky, some pretty light kettlebells. But those modalities, not that they're not useful, but those are not going to be sufficient to prepare an athlete for end stage rehab, and especially it will not prepare them for getting back in their sport on the court or on the field. Performance PTs can create a plyometric progression, whether that's vertical, linear, horizontal, and they understand how we can manipulate multiple variables such as ground contact time, fall height, to be able to create a thorough plyometric progression to systematically prepare an athlete. They can take an athlete through a return to run and through a return to sprint progression, understanding how we adjust different variables like band resistance, how we use hills to be able to help an athlete return to run and return to sprint safely. Performance PTs can improve multi-directional speed. They can systematically prepare an athlete to return to sport at their previous level or better. And I would say that's definitely our goal with every single athlete that steps into our clinic, is we want them at minimum to be as good as they were before they got hurt. But our number one goal and what we're hoping for is to help them be better than they were before their injury. And we're going to teach you guys how we do that. In physical therapy school, physical therapists being the movement experts was really drilled into us, but we didn't ever cover acceleration and max velocity running. We didn't talk about multi-directional speed. We did very little work on plyometrics. We did very little work on throwing, and we did definitely nothing on contact prep. So we're going to talk about the movement patterns for each one of these things. What are our model movement for acceleration and max velocity? What is our sprint-based rehab approach, and why is that important? We're going to talk about our multi-directional speed patterns. What are the shapes that athletes get into? What are the braking strategies athletes use? We'll talk about the difference between change of direction and agility, and how the strategies that athletes use in a change of direction drill versus an agility drill or an agility activity are different, and why. We'll talk about long versus short stretch shortening cycle plyometrics. What are the progressions that we use for those, for again, vertical, horizontal, linear plyometrics. We'll talk about upper body throwing mechanics, how compensations occur. We'll talk about the plyometric progressions we use to help athletes get back on the mound throwing as hard, or if not harder, than they were before. In terms of contact prep, we're going to talk about the shoulder and the compressive and distractive forces that the shoulder undergoes in contact sports. And we're going to go over all the different progressions that we use to help prepare an athlete for the forces that the shoulder needs to be able to handle in their sport. We are all about principles over methods, and we're going to cover all of the principles that help us make the decisions that we do clinically. Methods should be a reflection upon the principles that we're making decisions from. And ultimately, if you choose to use the methods, meaning like the exercises we do, awesome. If you don't, that's fine. As long as those exercise decisions are rooted in the principles that are important to you. So during the PT collab, we're going to cover the principles that are the most important to us and help us make all the decisions that we do with our athletes. So what can you expect in the collab? There will be a structured curriculum that we will release more information on in the coming months. Our number one goal for you guys is that we want you to gain actionable clinical skills. And I think in the kind of the con ed space right now, and we've been guilty of this in the past in terms of some of the courses that we've taken. They're really interesting, and they're based on tons and tons of really cool, interesting theory. But then when you leave the course and you show up to the clinic the next day and you work with your clients, you have almost no idea how to actually apply any of the things that you learned, because they're not necessarily actionable. So for us, we want you to be able to take every single thing that we talk about and apply it into the clinic, whether it's changing how you choose exercises, changing the understanding of why you're already doing what you're already doing, changing the cues that you use. We want you to be able to implement all the different things that we're going to talk about in the collab with your clients to help you gain better outcomes. We're going to go over subject expert presentations. That is something that's really important to me, because in the con ed space, I think there's lots of people who talk about things that they don't actually do. There's presenters who talk about multi-directional speed and sprinting progressions, but they don't actually work with anybody in that capacity. They don't work with anybody to improve multi-directional speed and sprinting or max velocity. And I would say that would be like akin to me talking about like the throwing progressions that I use with my athletes. I don't work with those. Like, you're only going to hear me talk about the cases that I actually treat, because we're going to be honest and share the case studies that like we've actually done with you guys. When it comes to the throwing stuff, Greg's going to talk about that. Greg is the one who sees tons and tons of throwers. So you're going to only hear us talk about the things that we actually do with people, not the quote unquote, what we would do with somebody that we haven't actually treated. We're going to be honest and open and share real case studies of the athletes that we've worked with. There'll be lots of formal and informal discussions. And like I just said, case studies, and we want your guys' case studies as well. We're going to do lots of video breakdowns of our own athletes. And we also want you all sending in videos for us to break down as well, and for you to provide your own video breakdowns. I have like 22,000 videos on my phone that are, I would say 90% of those are 3 to 8 second clips of my athletes that I have watched over and over and over and over to help me understand how an athlete moves, why the athletes move the way they do, understand their strategy. And we want to be able to help you do that with your athletes. We're going to do some literature reviews, talking about, some literature that I think is important. If you guys have literature you guys want to share, we want that as well. There will be an in-person learning opportunity, and we want to give you guys practical business insights. We've had Resilient for about 10 years now, and we've grown and learned a lot along the way. While we want you to gain actionable clinical skills as well, if you're interested in learning some of the business, entrepreneur, owner stuff as well, we're more than happy to discuss that too. You're going to connect with like-minded, motivated professionals, and I think that's huge. We've built a really cool network over the years. We've built an awesome team here at Resilient, and we want to share all of that with you guys. So you'll gain access to our network as well. So why is this a collab versus a mentorship? Learning requires collaboration. And to us, a mentorship implies that there's somebody as the authority and somebody who knows all the answers and somebody who should just kind of be spewing information that we all should be having our pen and pencil and learning from. We want this to be about all of us connecting and all of us learning together. We've had younger clinicians who are less experienced than us that we've learned a ton from, and we want to share our experiences with you. We want you to share your experiences with us. We want to collaborate and all grow clinically together. So that's why we're calling this the Performance PT Collab versus the Performance PT Mentorship, is because you're as much of a part of this as we are, and we want you to really, take ownership of your own learning. And like I said, we learn from people all the time. So this is not about you coming only to learn from us. We plan on learning from all of you as well. So who is the collab for? This is for rehab practitioners who work with athletes past the acute phases of rehab. So we talked about that kind of injury to sport continuum. If you've worked with anybody past that acute phase of injury, like the collab's for you. If you want to learn how to better handle upper and lower extremity, post-op athletes, and it doesn't have to be post-op, just injured athletes, whether it's more of an acute stage, more of a mid stage, more of an end stage, like we're going to talk about all of it during the collab. This idea of bridging the gap from injury on one side to sport on the other has been talked about for years. So we kind of view the Performance PT Collab and the people who are in this with us as the ones who are going to be bridging that gap to try to bring together our acute phase, acute phase practitioners, whether they're surgeons, whether they're ATs, whether they're PTs, and the end stage practitioners, whether that's more strength coaches, whether that's sport coaches, whether that's skill coaches, whatever it is. Our job is to be able to bring all of this together and have more continuity of care. So injury to sport continuum on the bridge, you probably get more super cool high-end graphics that I made like this as well during the collab. So be on the lookout for that. Here's a little brief history of Resilient. So Doug Kachijan, Greg Spatz, and myself, we founded Resilient together back in 2015. So we met at Columbia PT School in 2012. Greg and I were roommates. Doug was a year ahead of us in PT school. The summer before my senior year of college, I had interned at Mike Boyle's Strength and Conditioning. During that first semester of PT school, I was wearing a Mike Boyle's shirt in the library at school, printing something out before class. And then Doug saw me. He was looking at me through the glass and came in and asked me what I was doing wearing that shirt. And I said I had interned there and I was a first year PT student. And he said he had interned at Cressy's and was a second year PT student. And then me, Greg, and Doug just started hanging out and took us to kind of where we are today, which is pretty cool. I said we started Resilient in New York City in 2015. Then we opened up our second location in Chatham, New Jersey in 2017. Since that time, we've grown to a total of 6 locations. And we've had a ton of students over the years. Our students have gone on to work in pro sports and open their own clinics. And we've worked with athletes and operators from tons of pro sports and special operations community. And we've really had some cool experiences that we're, again, hoping to share with everybody in the collab. These are teams and organizations that we've either done education for or have had some sort of advisory role with. And we're really proud of all these different teams and organizations that we've had the opportunity to work with. And we want to share all the different things that we've done with them with all of you. The Resilient rules. These we got from our guys, Alan Groover and Ben Hagar, who were our clinical instructors while we were in PT school. We were at their clinic in Arizona. All 3 of us were at different times, and they were huge influences on us. So these are still something that we kind of run our business by and run how we treat and how we work with people. Rule number 1 is be a good person. We try to do everything with integrity and honesty, and we try to treat others, good. Treat others like you'd want to be treated. So rule number 1, pretty simple, be a good person. Rule number 2, don't suck. When it comes to clinically, what does that mean? For us, it's not treating with an ego. It's not treating in a way to look smart. It's not treating in a way that prioritizes like us over the clients or the athletes that we work with. And I think there are some practitioners out there who care about looking smart and sounding smart more than they care about the results, and more about how they look and how they appear rather than like the outcomes that the patients get. So rule number 2 is don't suck. Rule number 3 is keep it real. We try to be honest with everything that we do, with whether that's like the rationale behind why we're choosing an intervention or an exercise, and also what that exercise or what that intervention is actually doing. I think people make things really complicated because, again, it sounds good, it sounds smart, it sells, but for us, we're all just about keeping it real. And there's lots of things that we don't know why it works, we just know it works. And ultimately, that's more important than having some kind of ridiculous explanation that sells, rather than like being honest and open about stuff that we know and stuff that we don't know. So the 3 rules: we try to be a good person, don't suck, and number 3, keep it real. That's it for this first video of the Performance PT collab. You can follow us on social media at ResilientPPT. You can learn more about the collab on our website, performancerehabspecialist.com. And for watching this video, if you use the code THECOLLAB, you'll get 15% off of our courses, our Resilient Movement Foundations course, and our Return to Sport Acceleration and Agility course, which are both have PT and PTA CEUs. And that's it. Join the collab. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and we look forward to hearing more from you.